up, boys and girls? Welcome to the first edition of the Poker Spirit podcast. I am joined here by my lovely coworker and second in command, Mr. Michael Grunow. Michael, you are a mindset coach inside of Poker Spirit, and we've been working together for, what is it? Is it 3 years now?
I actually thought about this in advance, and it was August 2020 that we started working together.
Okay, so help the people who aren't good at math like myself. How long is that?
That puts me in the trap 2.5 years, right?
Okay.
But I started working in your program before that, so early 2020, I would say we know each other.
Okay. And yeah, so you were a spin and go player going through the Poker Mindset Mastery program to advance your climb up the spin and go stakes. And then I was looking for an assistant, and you decided to take the position, and the rest, I guess, is history. So now you are a mental game coach. You are working with guys playing all the way up to 25-50. How many clients do you have at the moment?
Good question. It just changed recently. I would say I talk to about 2 people every day, so round about, give or take, 10 people. Ongoing, like one-on-one clients, and then I do group coaching, and I have some irregular clients, etc.
Yeah. And I have to say, like, for the people, like most people listening to this probably don't know who you are unless they're already a part of Poker Spirit. But the reviews for Michael's coaching they're rave reviews. Like, it's very rare that a person who's worked with Michael says, you know what, I'm going to give up my spot in the roster. And we don't have a losing player that's working with you. So I'm curious, with people listening who maybe want to emulate some of your process. I mean, why do you think it is that all the guys you work with are getting stellar results?
I would say in this particular case, it's because of the relationship that I built with them. I don't think that any of the methods that I apply are special. I also don't think you could read or watch about them somewhere else on the internet. I, in fact, did the same. I worked with you, and then I read a bunch of books, and that's kind of my process. And I did a little bit of further education, but it's all out there. But why it works so well in my coaching is because I built a strong relationship with them. And I just received feedback recently from one of them who told me he never had a coach before who shared that openly about themselves. And that's what makes it a really good experience with me.
That I can relate to that. I mean, when I first started doing mental coaching, I was working at BitB, and one of the things I really felt made a difference was the relationship that I have with the players. It was like, for a lot of the guys, I'm talking to them about things, and I'm in the back of my mind, I'm like, this seems really important to you. Like, how many people in your life have you ever spoke about this with? And I felt like in many cases the answer might be between 0 and 2. So just having someone that you can honestly share the contents of your mind with is like kind of foundational, because otherwise you're sort of trying to build a house, but you don't have the foundation. You're building it on a hill or building it in the mud. You don't really know where you're starting from. You don't know what lies in your mind, but you're trying to sort things out. So yeah, I think coming together with somebody and just having that foundation of like, I'm here, this is where I want to go. These are the things I continually struggle with that I try to get right, and I've been failing for a long time. Hold me accountable, help me find strategies. Like, just this kind of open, honest relationship with a trajectory and accountability, I find to be very effective as well. All right. One question I have for you. I know that you do a lot of like, when you work with someone, often the conversation is going to go at some point to their relationships. I mean, you talk about the relationship being the focal point of the coaching. Relationships in general, with our friends, with our family, with our significant other, these is like one of the things that affects people's happiness the most in life. And as you know, there's this research article about the 4 horsemen of the relationship apocalypse. Have you heard about this before?
It rings a bell, but explain it a bit,
Okay.
please.
So for the people listening, and for you as well, there's this famous relationship study guide. Well, it's an institute that studies relationships called the Gottman Institute. And one of their most famous conclusions and articles was they did this huge research study, and they found they were able to predict when a couple would get a divorce with 90% accuracy. based on 4 factors they looked for.
Hmm.
And I'm gonna, from memory, I'm pretty sure the 4 factors are stonewalling, contempt, defensiveness, and criticizing.
Hmm.
Stonewalling is like when you don't let the other person get a word in. Defensiveness is like kind of obvious, like someone tries to tell you something, there's like, you know. Criticizing is always telling the other person what they're doing wrong. And contempt, actually, they rated this as the most severe. Like this is the one that will absolutely mess you up. And it's basically having already formed a negative opinion of the other person. So like they're talking and you kind of just roll your eyes like, you're just over it, you know, you no longer believe in them. That's kind of how I would word it. And when the more of these traits they saw in either party in a relationship meeting, like they'd have a couples counseling, and the more of these things they saw in the couple, the more likely it was that they were doomed. So I had this article linked up in I had like a PDF I would send to new people I worked with whenever they wanted to do coaching around their relationship. And this was like the top link that I sent them to read and start to look out for, along with like, you know, the 5 love languages and some of these other kind of things that once you understand them once, you understand them forever, and it like makes your relationship better. So following the explanation, what I wanted to ask you, what do you think would be the 4 like horsemen of the poker apocalypse?
Hmm.
Like if you're a poker player, what are the 4 things, the 4 traits that if you don't let these go, if you're exhibiting these on a daily basis, you're just gonna not reach your potential?
That's an amazing question, and I won't be able to put it into precise and amazing words like you did with this study, and maybe it won't end up at 4. But what jumped to my mind straight away, the first thing, what I just discussed with the one-on-one client that I had before this call, is I would call it thinking over process or thinking over action or whatever you want to call it. So people who start doing mindset work end up at a place where they feel like, yeah, okay, I worked with my coach for 6 months now. I fixed most of my problems. Most likely they won't come up again. And then they will come up again at latest once the pressure level rises. So they play higher stakes. They are under financial pressure or whatever. And in these cases, those guys often rely on, oh yeah, I got it right in the past, so it will stay right in the future. But that's wrong. Unless you have a strong system, a process, whatever you want to call it, something like a warm-up routine for your poker game, for example, that will ensure that you won't forget, that you won't fall into the traps from old days. You will kind of leave it to what I call thinking. So the knowledge somewhere in the back of your mind that how I want to react to mistake tilt or something. But unless you have a clear process for every single session, every day of your life, you won't get it right. There will be the day where you will kind of fail again. Yeah. So I don't know. Process overthinking could be the theme. That's my number 1.
So it's sort of like people take what they know for granted, but they don't know it to the level of mastery where they can't get it wrong.
Yeah.
So say you used to have a problem a lot, and now you mostly solve the problem and it's not bothering you on a daily basis. So you're like, okay, that's in the bag. Then stuff starts to go sideways in your life or in your career, or you're in a high pressure situation, and this thing that you took for granted isn't there for you because you haven't been honing it, you haven't been sort of respecting it anymore since you kind of thought it was all done. Is that about right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Reminds me of a quote like to think and not act is to not yet know.
Yeah.
And also there's levels. You know, you hear UFC fighters say this all the time. Actually, thinking of one in particular after a fight, but you know, they get on the microphone and they say, "Oh, there's levels to this. There's levels to this game." Well, it's true in poker too, right? Like there's levels to executing what you know and being able to play your A game. Like, you know, there's the final table, the big 109, and then there's the final table, the World Series Poker main event, and they are not the same. So being able to bring your A game, you know, ideally in poker, you're always trying to climb the stakes. So that means you're always going to be trying to bring your A game under new, more challenging conditions. So it's sort of like life keeps bringing you back to that same lesson to learn the deeper path, to learn the next level of that lesson. Does that ring true with your understanding?
Yeah, 100%. It kind of leads to a second point, or what could be my number two would be being complacent. What I see in some people that I worked with in the past is that for them it's such a boost to their profitability and ability both in life and in game when they start working with me, that after a few months they might end up at a point where they feel like, yeah, I figured it out, it's fine, I reached a sufficient level. But I think especially in poker you always need to keep the growth mindset, and it doesn't matter how great you are at a certain skill, you need to keep pushing. You also need to keep the balance. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm the, like, people will be annoyed when I say this again, but I recommend everyone to take at least 1 day off per week and have this as an iron rule for your life. Yeah, to have time off to keep the balance. But what I can see is, especially once people are breaking through to high stakes, they think the rules no longer apply to me. I don't need to keep working as hard anymore. I don't need to have these systems. I'm fine. And then they slack, and then it down spirals. So complacency, if that's a word, I don't know, that would be my number two.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, for anyone who thinks Michael is just a, whiplasher, you had me uninstall Telegram and I think Instagram from my phone, and Discord. So you had me uninstall my work apps when I was like kind of overworking. So I would say you definitely do believe in balance. With complacency, it's interesting that you bring that up because it does sort of tie in with the previous point, right? Like people want to get to a level where they think they're done.
Mhm.
And I wonder if this is like a masculine thing or like the way our culture is, that there is something like there is a flaw in perception where people think that to be working with somebody else, to be getting help, so to speak, with anything is some sort of a weakness, which I mean is just absolutely stupid. I mean, imagine if Elon Musk was like, I'm going to send rockets to Mars, but I don't want help,
Mm.
no employees, no staff, just me. I got a lighter, I got a twig here. We're gonna get this done. I mean, to not work with other people is like incredibly foolish. And even if you're sitting in your basement grinding PioSims, I mean, you didn't build PioSolver, right? You didn't build the tools. You're working with other humans and the results of their labor. So I think it almost ties into the lone wolf mentality, right? In that you can continue to grow by working with new coaches, by getting new feedback, by getting new perspectives. But when you hold this like I'm supposed to be able to do it on my own kind of core belief that's maybe even unconscious, you just sort of are always waiting for any kind of collaboration with somebody else to end. And I mean, you see this with different types of people that join the stable, right? Like someone comes into our team and I always call it, do they have like a long-term mindset or a transactional mindset? Like someone comes in and they're like, okay, what do I do here for a set period of time to get what I need and be on my way? And then someone else is like, this is a place I can grow. And they're not really thinking I need to get in and get out. They're thinking like, how can I become a part of this community for the long term? Like maybe work toward being a coach or, just a pillar in the community. And that's kind of the difference. Do they have a short-term mindset? Are they thinking about how do I get to my goal for next year and that's it? Or are they coming in with a long-term mindset, like I need to grow over the course of my career, over the course of 15, 20, 30 years? And how can I do that? And that's sort of when you have sort of, you're playing an infinite game, as Simon Sinek calls it in his book. I think I pronounced the name right. You don't get complacent because there's always a next growth. You're not trying to get the growth done so you can stop, right? But if you're kind of playing a short-term game or you just don't have the big picture, then you're always kind of trying to solve a problem, put out a fire. Oh, I don't focus well. Let me fix my focus. Okay, now I'm good. Leave me alone. Whereas it doesn't mean you always have to work with your specific coach forever, but you should always be doing something for your growth. You shouldn't feel like, okay, and even, I mean, sometimes that's relaxing, right? Like sometimes the most important thing you can do for your growth is, cancel all your meetings and take 3 weeks off. It's but it doesn't mean the journey's over. It just means it's time for like a clean slate and a reset.
Mhm. Yeah. it brought me to my third point, and it kind of also adds to the first two. And I would call it professionalism and mastery. And what I mean by that is the ideal client wants to outgrow me as their mindset coach. And I believe that's the approach that I took when I started working with your program, that I felt like I want to be like this guy who's coaching me. I want to even know it better in some areas like this guy. Yeah. And that's really what I want to inspire my clients to, that they will read all the books that I read and more, that they will try all the habits that I tried and suggest and more, that they will come up with new conclusions and like outsmart me in some areas. And essentially the ideal client is someone who turns out to become a mindset coach themselves. If they like reach that level, I'm truly happy. And maybe to speak to that further, even like I had these experiences where people felt like they got the value they wanted from the coaching with me. And that's great. That's, in my opinion, that's the best thing that can happen to a coach. And one of my clients recently added to that and said, Michael, even if we stop doing sessions because your coaching was so great, I bring you 3 other guys. It's a win-win-win-win-win. Okay. So even if the client outgrows you, that's kind of the goal of any good coach, in my opinion, that the client outgrows you. And that's one thing. And then the trap that some people walk into is that they try to limit themselves to poker mindset. But mindset coaching is not about poker only. Mindset coaching is about transforming your whole life. In my opinion, that's my approach. You could call it holistic. So once I'm done with the most urgent leaks in the poker game of someone, I want to move on to their personal life. I want to move on to their dramas from the past or whatever. I want to move on to their business ideas, etc. So a trap that people walk into is to think I'm fine with poker mindset, so I don't need to do any mindset work anymore. But that's wrong. Like everybody on the planet in a certain period of their life will need counseling, therapy, whatever. And yeah, that's a trap. And that's about mastery. Yeah. And professionalism is, I think, as a poker professional, if you truly want to perform at the top, at the elite level of poker in whatever format, it's an ongoing process. You will never get rid of mindset coaching. You will never get rid of this. You will always need to stay in it because times change and everyone else is getting better and you change as well, not always in the right direction. Sometimes old negative behaviors crawl back in. And so you need to stay on top of it. And that's what I mean by professionalism.
So much to unpack there. That was a really, really great kind of explanation about professionalism and mastery. And there is such a difference between the kind of person with maybe a transactional mindset, like I want to get this fixed and that's it, and someone else who's like kind of in it for the growth. And you see this in life. It's almost like there's 2 types of people in the world. There's people who I don't want to say have done the work, because as we know, the work is never over, right? But then there's people who haven't started, right? So when it comes to personal development, when it comes to mindset, when it comes to understanding your traumas, understanding what happened to you in your life and like how it affected you and how you can grow from it, and how you can choose to be different in the world, and not just be the result of your formative years. There's people who've like not got on board with that. Like they've never opened up to anyone, they're not open for it. They like, there's too much pain there that they don't want to look at. And then there's people who have generally done the work to some degree and are now able to sort of start tackling deeper work or new things that haven't happened yet, but from a place of progress, from a place of like they know what's possible because they know what they've already overcome that they used to think was unchangeable. If you grow up with certain habits, certain patterns in your life, and you just think this is how I am, this is how life is, like I have this problem, my doctor said I have this, I take this pill, like whatever. And then you really start to look at yourself and figure out how this identity got built, and you deconstruct the identity and you build a new one where maybe you don't have, ADD or whatever bullshit. And now you're like, holy shit, I can kind of overcome anything. And that's why you realize the work is never done, because now you're like an architect, It's like before you were living in the slums and you thought that's the whole world. Now you got outside, you built yourself a house, and you're like, all right, now let's go build a castle. And you know, the funny thing that came to my mind is when you talk about like, you know, people who don't really have an interest in doing the work outside of, you know, how do I win 2 more big blinds per 100? Those people aren't the people you want to hang out with. You know, they're not the people you want in your community. They're not the people you want to go to dinner with. They're not the people you want to watch sports with. Like people who haven't done any work on themselves and are still reacting to their kind of formative patterning from high school, they tend to be like just less enjoyable to hang out with, less enjoyable to communicate with, you know? They don't see themselves like the way that you're able to see them, you know? And obviously we don't know what's going on inside somebody until they open up, but it's just a bit limiting, you know, the depth of a relationship or a connection or an emotional bond you can have with someone who's kind of like still playing level one, if that makes sense. One other thing you talked about, you said like an ideal coach becomes a mindset coach. And this is something like I really like when that happens and people go in that degree, but at the same time, there is a line. Like there's definitely, I mean, you're a professional mindset coach. You don't play poker anymore, right?
Yeah.
So for somebody else who's a professional poker player first, one thing I run into a lot because I like to play poker. I'm sitting here doing a podcast with you. You know, I have a social life. I run a stable. It There isn't time for everything. You know, if I wanted to read every book that I would like to read, I need to live for an infinite amount of time. So people do have to make choices. And as a coach, I think one of the key things we can do is kind of help synthesize information for our clients. You know, there may be when one of my clients is going through something, often it's similar to something I've been through before. And I think about the books that help me the most, but then I know usually I have to choose because they're not going to read all of the ones that I read because they weren't full time in being a mindset coach. They didn't have the necessarily the time or the volition to do that. Some do. But I'll often try to think like which one is the most important and like get them to promise me to read that one. And then which two others have like 5 key ideas that they should understand, and then either get them to watch a YouTube summary or I'll just explain the ideas and like talk about them with the person. And maybe at some point in their life, if that situation kind of revisits enough times at different levels that they want to further their understanding, they may end up reading several or all of the books, but they may not. You know, they may just read one, take some key ideas like the 80/20 from a few others, and that's absolutely fine. You know, like I'm not here to sell books. I'm here to help people, right? So that was just something that kind of came to my mind as you were speaking. Like I agree very much that a coach's job is to, number one, accelerate the progress of somebody. I mean, when I say work with a coach, get help, it's not that you couldn't do it on your own. I mean, you could build Pio Solver from scratch. You could make an ICM calculator in an Excel document instead of using HRC. It's not smart, but you could. It's like you could figure out all this stuff from square one. Like potentially your coach might have had to. More likely they leaned on other people who were coaches before them. But you could just get fast tracked, right? You could get told exactly what book would help you the most, exactly what video would help you the most, exactly what practice in your daily life would help you the most. And you know, why you wouldn't want that, right? But in conclusion to this point, I do think a coach's job is to make himself obsolete. And one of the things I recognize from coaches that I not even just worked with, I mean, there's coaches that I had, but there's also coaches like people like Brendan Bouchard, read all his books, listened to his podcast for years, saw him speak live, you know, met him, but I never like worked with him one-on-one, but I can still hear his voice in my head. You know, if I have a problem, I can think, like I read that one question in my journal, like if I was my own high performance coach looking at my life, what would I tell myself? And it's always like, here's Brendan on my shoulder, you know what I mean? And I think that's something that if you work with a coach, you start to get. You start to be able to know with relatively high reliability what their perspective would be in this situation. I mean, one of the poker minds I've listened to the most, who I've never, again, worked with one-on-one, is Phil Galfond, right? Listen to like all his videos on Run It Once, stuff on Blue Fire Poker from back like, you know, when half today's regs weren't even 15 yet. Like I've been following Phil Galfond forever. And in some ways, I'm very grateful that I'm fortunate enough to think like Phil Galfond just because I've listened to him talk so much. You know, it's the same reason I like listening to people like Naval. Like it helps me think like them, and that process I think is only enhanced and accelerated by working with somebody one on one.
Yeah, maybe to add to that really quickly, I'm not saying that I want all of my clients to become poker mindset coaches. I just want, like, ideally they would be able to coach other people on a surface level at the end. Like I have one client in mind in particular, Raz, who is probably like getting to this level, yeah. But still, he would need to dedicate a lot of his time and not play poker anymore, which he should because he's fucking amazing, yeah. So I'm aware of that. I wanted to add one more point to the previous three that we discussed, which I'm known for, and I don't want to get it left over. No, it's not the fourth. It's not the fourth. I have something prepared for the fourth. But for the first three, I just wanted to add, like, you gave me the name Mr. Consistency at some point. And when we talk about professionalism and mastery, I think this is really crucial. And I know that both, like, we, for example, we have some arguments sometimes over consistency. But my approach to professionalism is leading a very consistent life. I truly believe that if you want to be a master in anything, most likely you will need to work like for your whole lifetime with like daily efforts on this field or in this field. And I don't want to argue against what I said earlier with keeping the balance and like having off days. That's important as well. But I still think it's like for me as a coach and for my players to be very successful at high stakes, I think it's very important that they put in daily work, yeah, while having vacations, while having days off. But to have this mindset of I'm still in the same process since day one. I'm still working on this. Like I don't want to slack because then I fall out. Like I never want to be like feel accomplished. I never want to be like fully satisfied in a way where I lose my attraction to the game or to my profession or whatever. Yeah. So that's what I mean with consistency. I love being a coach every day, even on the hard days. I still love it. I look like that's something that I learned from the Mind Illuminated about, like a book about meditation. He said, like, whenever you doubt your meditation practice, look for the joy. And I think that's an amazing guideline for your whole life, to look for the joy even on the tough days, because that's what keeps me in this process of being a mindset coach. And that's the same that I wish for every one of my clients, to look for the joy every single day, to stay consistent, and even on the tough days, still do your warm up, because you know all the good reasons to do it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that. I mean, you said when you started working with me, and when anyone works with a coach, the goal is to outgrow the teacher. And I think when it comes to consistency, you've obviously squashed me. Michael, for those guys, how long is your meditation streak right now? How many days you've consistently meditated for?
800 or 900 something.
That's pretty nuts.
It's pretty much since I started being a part of your program, I would say.
I mean, imagine this: you teach someone to meditate. They meditate every day for 3 years. And then you look at your habit tracker, and you have meditated in like 4 days, and you feel like an asshole. Michael's making me feel bad for 3 years. You've also done the Wim Hof breathing exercise every day since first learning how to do it, right?
Yeah, roundabout. Yeah.
More impressive. I mean, it only takes a few minutes, but still, it's kind of wild because it's more like active.
Yeah, but it's very like to speak to what I said before about consistency. Even on the hard days, I pull through, I do it, and I look for the joy, and I try to see the purpose in this, and I try to see why I made this decision once. And when since I had good reasons back then, and they haven't changed since then, I just keep going.
Yeah, that makes sense. In fairness, I think for most people, they get tripped up by hangovers, and you don't drink, right?
Yeah, that helps as well. Yeah.
That probably helps.
Yeah.
All right, and let's figure out what is your fourth horseman you've been holding on to for us.
Yes, I prepared something for that a few years back already. And that's something that at some point in my coaching, every single client will see. And usually it's when they tell a bad beat story or something like that. Like, don't get me wrong. I want my clients to, like, this is the hour in their week where they can bitch around, so to speak. But still, I want to give them a friendly reminder. And this is the sign that I show to them when they complain. Focus on the things you can control. And in some way, this should have been my number one, but I forgot about it. So it's not my number four. To me, like what was the most impactful in my life, maybe in the work with you and building this team and everything, was to adapt some, or to adopt to some of the teachings from Stoicism. And for me, this distinction between the things that I control and the things that I don't control, this is one of the biggest life realizations ever. And it's a thing that, yeah, helps me with my biggest struggles. Like when I had personal losses in my life, when I had clients who suffered a lot, or whatever bad events happened, it gave me a lot of comfort in a way to look at this sign on my desk and like to realize, okay, it's horrible what happened, but I have no control over it. What I can control is my reaction. So let's make sure that I have that I show a good reaction, that I'm empathetic, that I'm taking the time to grieve, whatever is needed. This distinction was huge, and it first started with a worksheet from your course, which was called the circle of control, I believe. And I still have it archived, and every now and then I look at my circle of control from back then, and it's really funny because weather was a part of it, I believe.
So what Michael's referencing, if I was good with like Zoom whiteboards, I would try to draw it here, but I'm a fish, so I won't try. But basically, it's like just a very simple sheet of paper in the course that has two circles, one inside the other, like an egg. And in the small circle, it's like things you can control. And then in the bigger circle, it's, you know, things you can influence. And then outside all the circles, the whole rest of the sheet of paper is like no control. And then they have people write down like where the things in their life that they think about go. And you find out pretty quickly that the things inside the where you can control is relatively small list. And most everything else is either influence, like, you know, poker results you can influence by studying, or like politics, no control, you know? And then you ask people, where do you spend your attention? Like, what are you thinking about? And most people don't even ask that question. What do I think about on a daily basis? But you start to ask yourself, anytime you get upset, what am I thinking about? And then look to the sheet and you're like, it's like your attention's like a flashlight. If you're shining it outside the circle of control, you're going to have a bad time. You know, like, oh no, this person won the election. Oh no, this is happening in the world. Oh no, like, you know, it's raining. Oh, you know what I mean? And you just, because what can you do about it? If it's out of your control, you're just allowing something that you have no control over to make you unhappy. You're going to be unhappy. So I guess if we were looking for the horseman of the apocalypse, is it lazy focus? Is it like disorganized focus? You know, attention. They say where attention goes, energy flows. So it's kind of flowing your energy into places where it just goes to die. Poor energy management. There's many ways we could word it. So if these are your four horsemen, so to speak, I guess to kind of flip those for the four positive things that people, the antidotes, right? Like the ways to defeat the horsemen, to overcome this like thinking action loop where you like, what would you say? Like, is it to take action, to take massive action, to take consistent action?
Yeah, it would be to develop a system for yourself that ensures that you stay on the path. Like it can be certain habits that you do on a daily basis, or it can be like having your sessions that you play in poker structured in a way where you always have a warm-up, you always have a cool down, you always spend your breaks not on the phone, but doing a little meditation, a cold shower, whatever. You have systems in place to ensure that you take action instead of overthinking or like, yeah, letting your energy go into nothing, so to speak.
And so it's again coming back to like not letting your energy go to nothing. So it's like systems to stay accountable.
Yeah, that's a good way of wording it.
It's easy to repeat when you're stressed because you have like the blueprint.
Yeah.
For not becoming complacent, would you say stay curious?
Yes, I would say a couple of things. I would always try to be surrounded by people who want to be successful in a similar field. So that's why I think our team is so wonderful, because you're surrounded by people who can give you some inspiration even when you are at rock bottom. Yeah. So be surrounded by people who are like curious, expose yourself to information that is outside of your bubble, I would say, is another thing. So like read books that you like on fields that you have no clue about. Read about opinions from people who can formulate them in a really great way that are polar to your own opinion. Yeah, polar opposite to that. And maybe also like speaking to poker players in particular, don't stay on the computer all the time. Like go out, do something else. Like don't be one-dimensional. Those are three things that come to my mind.
We got systems for action and accountability. We got stay growing and curious. Network and who you're around can help you do that. Reading new books, going outside. Professionalism and mastery is kind of already written in positive language, right? Like be the professional, work toward mastery, and then focus on what you can control. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So there you have it. Michael's template for exponential poker success.
You always were really great with names.
It's amazing I'm so terrible at marketing considering I'm pretty good with names. I just like sound fun to say. When I was trying to get my dog to stop like begging for food in a restaurant, you like take a spoon and you kind of like gently tap him on the head because they don't like that and they understand like I did something wrong. And then in the future you can just pick up the spoon and they immediately stop like barking and being a dick. And I called it the spoon of fiery justice. That's my greatest name I ever came up with.
Amazing.
Fiery justice, excellent art on a magic card. All right, so it's funny, I actually had my own answers, which are sort of different. And I wonder, probably your answers are better, so now I'm gonna feel like a fish going through mine. But the things that I looked at, I think yours were sort of higher level problems. Like you looked at the four, and I think there is a difference between the four things that hold back your average person from making it to low stakes and like beating 50-cent dollar versus like the main things that hold somebody back from becoming a winner at mid stakes versus maybe the things that will hold someone back from being a high stakes crusher or even things that'll hold somebody back from being a happy person, right? Because there are some people who succeed in poker who you wouldn't want on your team, you wouldn't want to hang out with, and like they're not happy with their life. And I think a lot of the things you talked about would help a person in that situation. And I think a lot of the things I mentioned are traits you might see in that person that might make you not want to hang out with them. So when I looked at the things that I see that I really feel hold poker players back, they're sort of, I feel like pretty obvious. But mine were entitlement, superiority, which I guess you could say is like, I don't want to say ego because everyone has an ego, but like this feeling that you're better than other people, right? Like a diluted ego, like it's whatever the opposite of humility is, because humility, I think, is like the golden trait for a poker player. Like if you can be highly skilled and humble, you're going to make really profitable decisions. Game selection, choosing your spots, choosing what to do to advance your career. Like humility allows you to be honest with yourself and make rational decisions. Not having humility causes you to delude yourself, take bad spots, not get the help you could otherwise benefit from. Like it's just not having humility is a huge horseman for me. Entitlement is sort of obvious. It's one of those personality traits. Nobody wants to hang out with someone who's entitled, and if people don't want to be around you, then you're cutting off your network, and being surrounded by other people who are growing is the thing that's going to help you the most. Impatience, right? I can't learn what you think you already know. That falls into superiority again, but also just like, I want to be there tomorrow, so I don't get there at all. If I understood the process and it's going to take some time. I mean, if somebody comes in and their focus is all over the place, they're not going to be focusing like a monk the next day. But if they meditate every day, in 6 months, they might be a whole new person. So it's kind of like, you got to be committed to the process. And I think people who you see a lot, it goes back to that short-minded thinking. You see a lot of this, like, transactional, like just everybody wants the magic pill, right? Everybody wants the thing like, oh, I can't focus. You could learn to meditate or you could take Adderall, and there's meditation people and then there's Adderall people. And then the last thing I think is like narrow-mindedness. And this is basically just the antithesis of a growth mindset, right? if you're not open. You're not open to share things with people. You're not open to connect with people. You're not open to, I mean, in poker, in the terms of making money, you're not open to strategies that are different than the one you're using, right? Like you think what you know is right, and you can't learn what you think you already know. So just being narrow-minded is like, I mean, narrow-minded keeps people playing on regulated sites when the apps are softer. It keeps people playing no limit hold'em against Russian bots when they could be playing like, 5-card PLO against whales. It keeps people, running the wrong race because they don't want to think about what could be more profitable. And for some people, it might even keep them in poker when there's something else in their life that might be more compelling, right? So yeah, I basically wrote that I think all of these traits lead to isolation. Entitlement makes you not some people want to be around. Superiority, same thing. Impatience, same thing. Narrow-mindedness, same thing. And ultimately, like, the more isolated you are, the more unhappy you're going to be, the more likely you are to fail or not reach your potential because, being surrounded by other people who are having the traits that we want to have is going to help you have them and help you go further. So ultimately, these things lead to failure and misery.
Doesn't sound good.
No. All right. So I feel like for anyone who's interested in poker mindset, that was probably a lot to digest. And there's probably things they're nodding their head to, and they're like, yeah. And then there's probably other things that they're like, didn't think about. But I feel like that was a pretty good map of some of the most important things to avoid and things to embrace. Is there anything else that you want to leave the people with?
Maybe just a last thing to mention. I think my top 4 could change any day. Like it's kind of the essence, but I most likely missed many important things that if I will listen to this in retrospect, I will say, oh, how could you miss that? But I think that's a good takeaway that there's no map to poker mindset. All of this can be inspiration, but it depends on each and every individual player. What's the most important thing for you in your career right now and in your life right now? So I would always treat it like this. Every information about poker mindset is something like you need to work with it. And there's no magic pill. There won't be the one coaching that you need and then you will break through to 510 or something. No, you need to work with yourself on a consistent basis. You need to enter the process and never leave it again. And that's the only magic pill that is.
The magic pill is being on the path,
As Yoda said, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. I loved Yoda. My wrestling coach in high school always used to reference Yoda. He claimed that Yoda was like Steven Spielberg's way of imparting his own philosophy to people because Steven Spielberg was supposedly a very philosophical person. He claimed to know him. I don't know. But do or do not. There is no try.
Yeah.
I like this one. One that I always remember from my wrestling coach. I think about this every time I lift up weights at the gym or I finish a set and it's time to get to another one. The sooner I get on the train, the sooner I get home.
It's
good. Like so many people still didn't get on the train. There's like they don't know how to be in a relationship. They don't know how to organize their schedule. They're just kind of, as I like to say, flying by the seat of their pants, right? They don't have a strategy for life. They don't have a strategy for dating or for relationships. They don't have a strategy for their home life, for their habits. They're just flying by the seat of their pants. And it's like, the sooner you get on the train, the sooner you get home. The sooner you start to try to put together a strategy for yourself, either alone or with a coach, the sooner you're going to have like an optimized, working, fantastic strategy that allows you to reach your potential, to be effective, to get, way more done in less time, which is what most people want, right?
Amazingly said.
I've got some fun questions. I have 2 fun questions. Okay. So what would you say to our listeners who want to step up their poker game? They've been listening to this conversation. They're inspired. They're realizing some flaws. They're realizing some areas for growth. Like, what would you tell somebody who's listening to this? What should they do today to start being on the path to becoming an elite, high stakes poker player and a happy human being?
Use the momentum. Once you are inspired, don't let it go to waste, but start with something, start with an action today. Don't think, but take action. So start with one habit that we mentioned, start with one book that we mentioned. I don't know, reach out to one person in your network that you know will be good for you, anything like that. Not taking, like, that's a question I like to ask my clients, and that I learned from our sales coach, Joe Marcoux. How's not taking action serving you right now?
Obviously, it's not, right?
Exactly. So take action today. It doesn't matter which point, just pick one and start.
Reminds me of my kind of system for how habits take shape, which is you start with inspiration, right? And then you get momentum because you do something, you take some action. I'm inspired. Today I'm going to go to the gym, get some momentum. Oh, okay, I went to the gym today. Maybe I can do that tomorrow. And then you start actually making some shifts. Discipline, do it for a long enough time that it becomes normal for you. And eventually it becomes a part of your identity. Eventually, I'm a kind of person who goes to the gym, or I'm a kind of person who meditates every day. I'm not a kind of person trying to do this new thing, or like trying to diet, or like, oh, I'm going to change. Like, now I'm this, and I used to be that. Like the identity shift that we all want, it comes at the end of basically the inspiration, momentum, discipline, period. And if you take the inspiration, you carry it into some momentum, you get the snowball rolling, and then you do it for long enough, you do it even on the days it's hard, even when the snowball hits a rock, eventually you get to the top of the mountain, you can build your new snowman and be a new person.
Yes, that's it. So start today.
All right. Last question, and this is a personal question. If this was the last opportunity that you were going to have to speak to the good people in the world, if you were going to be beamed back up to whatever planet you came to visit us from, what are the 3 life lessons? Doesn't have to be anything to do with poker at all, but what are the 3? Can be a quote, can be a lesson. Like, what are the 3 things you would want to tell people that, for whatever reason?
Again, tomorrow I would give a different answer maybe, but today, focus on the things you can control, number 1. Number 2, something that I learned from Joe Marcoux as well. When emotions go up, intelligence goes down. That's what keeps me humble personally, and that's what keeps my ego in check. Yeah. And third one, very simple, like again, like kind of about the ego. There's more in the world than you. We discussed a lot about self-optimization and like to become a better poker player, etc. But I think to become the best poker player you can be, it's important to strive to become the best human being you can be. So not only focus on yourself, don't focus on like just being the most profitable poker player, but also focus on being the like nicest poker player, the best person to be around, the person that will have a good plan for their life even once they accomplished everything they want in poker. So yeah, be a good human being as well. That would be my final message.
You don't want your tombstone to read "won the most money in poker" at your empty funeral?
It won't matter in the end. I'm afraid that I won the most money in poker. I think it will matter most if I had a good influence on other human beings.
You never showed a girl at a nightclub your shark scope?
I never went to the nightclub, I'm afraid.
All right, fair enough. The second one again, that was it. When emotions go up, intelligence goes down. That's a great one. It reminds me that there's a famous quote coming to bring it back to relationship coaching: never marry a person until you've seen them with bad internet. You know, it's easy to be zen when the internet's working, but you know, when you start folding pocket kings pre-flop, it's you know, that's the real mindset challenge, you know.
Yeah.
All right, Michael. Well, thank you very much for the time today. You know, I certainly learned a lot, I refreshed with a lot of things as well, and I hope this was beneficial for our audience out there. And yeah, maybe we'll have you back on again to see if your takes have changed. As you said, they fluctuate on a daily basis. So. All right.
Thank you as well.
Thank you. We'll speak soon because we speak every day.
Yes.
Ciao.
Take care.